Marcus Chen had spent 15 years perfecting his craft. Every morning before sunrise, he would be at the dojo, his feet bare against the cold wooden floor, practicing the same kicks and punches he had performed thousands of times before. The black belt around his waist was not just a piece of fabric. It represented every drop of sweat, every bruised knuckle, and every moment of discipline that had shaped him into one of the most respected martial artists in the city. People who knew Marcus described him as focused and calm. He never raised his voice, never showed off his skills in public, and always walked away from confrontations. His master had taught him that true strength was not about fighting but about control. The ability to hurt someone and choosing not to was the highest form of martial arts. Marcus believed this with every fiber of his being. On a bright Tuesday morning, Marcus was invited to participate in a special event at the National Palace. The royal family was hosting an international martial arts demonstration, and instructors from around the world were coming to showcase different fighting styles. Marcus felt honored to represent his school. He packed his uniform carefully, made sure his belt was clean, and arrived at the palace gates 2 hours early. The palace was more magnificent than he had imagined. Golden spires reached toward the sky, and marble columns lined the entrance. Guards in crisp red uniforms stood at attention every few meters, their faces emotionless and their postures perfect. Marcus showed his invitation to the first checkpoint and was directed toward the main courtyard where the demonstration would take place. As he walked through the corridors, Marcus practiced his breathing techniques. He wanted to be centered and calm for his performance. The demonstration was not a competition, but he still wanted to honor his master and his school with an excellent showing. He was so focused on his mental preparation that he did not notice the commotion happening near the west entrance of the courtyard. A group of tourists had somehow wandered into a restricted area. They were taking photos and laughing loudly, clearly unaware that they were not supposed to be there. Palace security was trying to redirect them politely, but the tourists seemed confused about which direction to go. The situation was chaotic but harmless. Marcus entered the courtyard and began his warm-up routine in a quiet corner. He started with stretches, then moved into light shadow boxing. Other martial artists were doing the same, each in their own space preparing for the performances ahead. The energy in the courtyard was peaceful and respectful, then everything changed in an instant. One of the confused tourists, a middle-aged man with a camera around his neck, suddenly broke away from the group and started running. He was not trying to cause trouble. He had simply seen what he thought was the correct exit and decided to make a dash for it. But his timing could not have been worse. At that exact moment, the royal family was making their way to the viewing platform. The queen, the king, and their young daughter were walking in a single line, surrounded by royal guards. The tourist, in his panic and confusion, ran directly toward them without realizing who they were. He was just trying to find his way out. The royal guards reacted immediately. Their training kicked in, and they moved to intercept the running man. But the tourist was moving fast, and the angle was awkward. One guard, a tall man with a stern face, stepped directly into the tourist's path. The collision seemed inevitable. Marcus saw everything unfold in slow motion. His martial arts training had sharpened his reflexes and awareness to an incredible level. He could see that the tourist was going to crash into the guard, who would then stumble backward toward the queen. It was a domino effect waiting to happen, and someone could get seriously hurt. Without thinking, Marcus moved. His body acted before his mind could fully process what was happening. He crossed the courtyard in 3 powerful strides, closed the distance, and launched himself into the air. His right leg extended in a perfect flying sidekick, a technique he had practiced 10,000 times. His foot connected with the royal guard's chest with precision and force. The guard flew backward, away from the royal family, and landed hard on the marble floor. The tourist stumbled and fell in a different direction, crashing into a decorative plant. The queen and her family were completely unharmed, though visibly shocked by what had just happened. For a moment, the entire courtyard was frozen in silence. Every eye was on Marcus, who landed gracefully and immediately dropped into a defensive stance. His heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding his system. He had just kicked a royal guard in the face. Well, technically the chest, but it did not matter. He had struck a member of the palace security while the royal family was present. The other guards surrounded him instantly, their hands on their weapons. Marcus raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no further harm. He tried to explain what had happened, that he was preventing an accident, but his words came out jumbled and unclear. The situation looked bad from every angle. The head of security, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper voice, approached Marcus. She demanded to know who he was and why he had attacked her guard. Marcus explained about the tourist, about the potential collision, about his split-second decision to prevent injury. But as he spoke, he realized how weak his explanation sounded. He had assaulted a royal guard on palace grounds during a royal appearance. The martial arts demonstration was immediately cancelled. The other instructors were escorted out of the palace quickly and quietly. Marcus was taken to a holding room. Not quite a cell, but definitely not a comfortable waiting area. 2 guards stood by the door watching his every move. He sat on a hard wooden bench and tried to process what had just happened. His entire life, Marcus had been taught to avoid violence. He had walked away from countless provocations, turned down dozens of street challenges, and always chosen peace over conflict. And now, in one moment of instinct and reaction, he had done the one thing he had spent years avoiding. He had hurt someone, and not just anyone, but a royal guard. Hours passed slowly. Marcus was questioned by security officials, palace administrators, and eventually by representatives of the royal family themselves. Each time he told the same story. He was trying to prevent an accident. He saw danger and reacted. His intentions were good, even if his actions looked terrible. As the sun began to set, casting orange light through the small window of the holding room, Marcus wondered what would happen next. Would he be arrested? Banned from the palace forever? Would his martial arts school be disgraced because of his actions? He had come to the palace to honor his training, and instead he had created an international incident. What Marcus did not know was that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The kick that had taken him a split second to perform was going to set in motion a series of events that would test everything he thought he knew about honor, duty, and what it truly meant to be a warrior. The door to the holding room opened with a heavy creak. Marcus looked up, expecting to see another security official with more questions. Instead, a man in an elegant navy suit entered, followed by the royal guard Marcus had kicked. The guard's face was bruised and he moved stiffly, clearly in pain. Marcus stood immediately, bowing deeply in respect and shame. The man in the suit introduced himself as Lord Ashford, the head advisor to the royal family. His voice was measured and his eyes were calculating. He studied Marcus for a long moment before speaking. The guard, whose name was Edmund, stood silently beside him, his expression unreadable. Marcus prepared himself for the worst. Arrest, deportation, public humiliation all seemed like real possibilities, but Lord Ashford surprised him. He explained that the palace security had reviewed footage from multiple cameras positioned around the courtyard. They had seen everything. The confused tourist running blindly, the awkward positioning of the guards, and the genuine danger of a collision that could have injured the Queen. They had also seen Marcus's incredible speed and precision. The kick had been perfectly controlled, pushing Edmund back without causing serious injury. Edmund himself spoke next. His voice was rough and he winced as he shifted his weight. He admitted that Marcus's actions, while shocking and unauthorized, had likely prevented a much worse situation. If the tourist had crashed into him at full speed, Edmund would have fallen directly into the Queen's path. There could have been injuries, panic, and a security nightmare. Marcus had acted to protect the royal family, even if his method was highly unconventional. Marcus felt relief wash over him, but Lord Ashford raised a hand. The situation was not as simple as understanding what had happened. The palace had a serious problem. Word of the incident was already spreading. Witnesses had seen a civilian martial artist strike a royal guard. Some versions of the story made Marcus sound like an attacker. Others made him sound like a hero. The truth was complicated, and complicated truths did not spread well. Lord Ashford explained that the royal family needed to control the narrative. They could not have people believing their security was weak, or that random martial artists could assault guards without consequence. At the same time, they recognized that Marcus had acted with good intentions. So they were offering him a choice, one that would change everything. The palace wanted to hire Marcus as a special security consultant. He would work directly with the royal guard, teaching them advanced martial arts techniques and helping them improve their hand-to-hand combat skills. In exchange, The incident would be presented to the public as a planned demonstration of the palace's commitment to security excellence. Marcus would be portrayed as a respected instructor who had been invited to test the guards' readiness. It was a perfect solution for the palace's public relations problem. But for Marcus, it was terrifying. He was a martial arts instructor who taught children and adults in a neighborhood dojo. He had no experience with palace security, no knowledge of royal protocols, and no idea how to navigate the complex world of politics and nobility. Everything about the offer felt overwhelming. Lord Ashford gave Marcus until the next morning to decide. He was escorted to a guest room in the palace staff quarters. It was small but comfortable, with a soft bed and a window overlooking the palace gardens. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and tried to think clearly. His master had always taught him to follow the path of honor. But what was honorable in this situation? That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept replaying the moment of the kick over and over in his mind. He thought about his students back at the dojo, about the life he had built, and about the unexpected door that had just opened in front of him. Working at the palace would mean prestige and recognition, but it would also mean leaving behind everything familiar. In the morning, Marcus made his decision. He sought out Lord Ashford and accepted the position. He told himself that if his skills could help protect the royal family, then it was his duty to serve. Deep down, he also felt responsible for Edmund's injury. Working with the guards would be a way to make amends and prove that his intentions had been pure. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus was given a formal title, Special Combat Instructor to the Royal Guard. He was issued a uniform, a palace identification badge, and a small office near the training grounds. His first sessions with the guards were awkward and tense. Many of them resented him. They saw him as an outsider who had embarrassed one of their own and then been rewarded for it. Edmund was the exception. Despite being the one Marcus had kicked, Edmund became his strongest ally. He understood what had really happened in the courtyard, and he respected Marcus's skill. Edmund helped Marcus understand the guards' culture, their training routines, and their unwritten rules. Without Edmund's support, Marcus would have been lost. Marcus designed a new training program that combined traditional Royal Guard techniques with modern martial arts principles. He focused on situational awareness, rapid response, and controlled force. The guards were already well-trained soldiers, but Marcus showed them how to adapt their skills to the unique challenges of palace security. Slowly, grudgingly, they began to respect him. 3 months into his new position, Marcus felt like he was finally finding his rhythm. The guards were performing better in their drills, and the tension between him and the team was easing. He even started to enjoy aspects of palace life. The history, the tradition, and the sense of purpose all appealed to him in ways he had not expected. Then Lord Ashford summoned him to a private meeting. The advisor's face was serious, more serious than Marcus had ever seen it. He closed the office door and activated a device that would prevent anyone from listening to their conversation. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. Something was very wrong. Lord Ashford explained that the royal family had received credible intelligence about a threat. A group of extremists was planning something, though the details were unclear. The threat was significant enough that the king had ordered a complete review of all security protocols. Every guard, every system, and every procedure was being examined and strengthened. Marcus assumed he was being told this as part of his role as combat instructor. He started to discuss additional training scenarios, but Lord Ashford stopped him. The advisor leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The intelligence suggested that the threat was not external. Someone inside the palace was working with the extremists. There was a traitor among the staff or the guards. The room seemed to spin around Marcus. A traitor in the palace meant that everything was compromised. Trust was the foundation of security, and if that foundation was cracked, the entire structure could collapse. Lord Ashford explained that the royal family needed someone they could trust absolutely, someone outside the normal chain of command who could observe and investigate without raising suspicion. They wanted Marcus to be that person. His position as a new instructor gave him access to the guards without being fully part of their ranks. He could watch, listen, and report anything suspicious. It would be dangerous work. If the traitor realized they were being hunted, they might act rashly or violently. Marcus would be putting himself in the middle of a situation far beyond anything his martial arts training had prepared him for. Marcus asked for time to think, but Lord Ashford shook his head. Time was a luxury they did not have. The threat could materialize at any moment. The royal family needed an answer now. Marcus thought about the Queen, the King, and their young daughter. He thought about Edmund and the other guards who had started to trust him. He thought about what his master would say about duty and honor. He agreed to help. Lord Ashford handed him a secure communication device and a list of specific things to watch for. Unusual meetings, changes in behavior, guards accessing areas they should not, anything that seemed out of place. Marcus left the office feeling like he had just stepped off a cliff. His simple life as a martial arts instructor was gone forever. As he walked back to the training grounds, Marcus passed by the courtyard where everything had started. The spot where he had kicked Edmund was just ordinary marble now, no different from any other part of the floor. But for Marcus, it would always be the place where his life changed direction. He had come to the palace by accident, stayed out of duty, and now he was being asked to become something he had never imagined. A spy among the royal guard, hunting for a traitor who could be anyone. His martial arts skills had opened this door, but they would not be enough for what came next. Marcus began his secret work the very next day. During training sessions, he watched the guards more carefully than before. He paid attention to who arrived early, who stayed late, and who seemed distracted or nervous. Every conversation he overheard was analyzed for hidden meanings. Every casual glance between guards was noted. It was exhausting work that made him question his own judgment constantly. The first week brought nothing unusual. The guards trained hard, followed their routines, and showed no signs of suspicious behavior. Marcus started to wonder if the intelligence had been wrong, or if he was simply not skilled enough to spot what he was looking for. He had been trained to fight, not to investigate. The subtle art of observation and deduction was completely new territory for him. Edmund noticed the change in Marcus's demeanor. During a water break, he pulled Marcus aside and asked if something was wrong. Marcus wanted desperately to confide in his friend, but Lord Ashford had been clear. No one could know about the investigation, not even Edmund. Trust no one was the first rule of finding a traitor. So Marcus made up an excuse about missing his old dojo and feeling out of place at the palace. Edmund seemed to accept the explanation, but Marcus caught a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Great, Marcus thought. Now his only friend suspected something was off. This secret mission was already complicating his relationships. He resolved to be more careful about hiding his concerns. A good investigator had to be invisible, and Marcus was failing at that basic requirement. 2 weeks into the investigation, Marcus noticed something odd. One of the senior guards, a woman named Captain Reeves, had started taking unusual breaks. She would disappear for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, always with a vague excuse about checking perimeter stations or reviewing duty rosters. The timing was irregular and she always went alone. It could mean nothing, or it could mean everything. Marcus began following Captain Reeves during her breaks, staying far enough back to avoid detection. His martial arts training helped him move quietly and use shadows effectively. On the third day of following her, he saw her enter a storage room in the oldest wing of the palace. She stayed inside for 12 minutes, then emerged and returned to her duties as if nothing had happened. The next day, Marcus waited until Captain Reeves was busy with an inspection, then slipped into the storage room himself. It was filled with old furniture, dusty paintings, and equipment that had not been used in years. He searched carefully, looking for anything unusual. Behind a stack of chairs, he found a loose stone in the wall. His heart raced as he pulled it free and reached into the cavity behind it. Inside was a small notebook filled with codes and abbreviations Marcus could not understand. There were dates, times, and what looked like locations within the palace. This was it. This had to be evidence of the traitor's activities. Marcus carefully photographed each page with the special device Lord Ashford had given him, then replaced everything exactly as he had found it. He left the storage room feeling triumphant and terrified in equal measure. That evening, Marcus reported his findings to Lord Ashford. The advisor's face grew darker with each page of photos. He explained that the codes matched a known encryption method used by the extremist group. Captain Reeves was likely coordinating with outside forces, providing them with information about palace security. It was exactly what they had feared. The traitor was not just passing along gossip. They were actively helping plan an attack. Lord Ashford wanted to arrest Captain Reeves immediately, But Marcus urged caution. If they arrested her now, they would lose the chance to understand the full scope of the plot. Who else was involved? What was being planned? When would it happen? Reeves was just one piece of a larger puzzle. Lord Ashford reluctantly agreed. They would continue surveillance and try to gather more information before making any moves. The following week was the most stressful of Marcus's life. He had to continue training sessions with Captain Reeves, acting as if nothing was wrong, while knowing she was betraying everything the Royal Guard stood for. Every time she spoke to him, Marcus wondered if she suspected his investigation. Every time she smiled, he questioned whether it was genuine or calculated. Marcus also had to watch the other guards for signs that anyone else was involved. The paranoia was eating him alive. He started seeing threats everywhere. A guard checking his phone could be receiving instructions. 2 guards talking quietly could be plotting. Even Edmund's friendly behavior started to seem suspicious. What if he was part of it too? What if Marcus's only friend in the palace was actually an enemy? Sleep became impossible. Marcus would lie in his bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios and possibilities. His martial arts training had taught him discipline and focus, but nothing had prepared him for the mental strain of suspecting everyone around him. He started losing weight and his hands developed a slight tremor from stress. 3 weeks after discovering the notebook, Marcus followed Captain Reeves again. This time she did not go to the storage room. Instead, she walked through the gardens toward the east wall of the palace grounds. Marcus stayed hidden behind hedges and statues, watching her every move. She stopped at a bench near the wall and sat down, checking her watch repeatedly. After 5 minutes, a figure approached from the shadows. It was one of the junior guards, a young man named Thomas, who had always seemed eager and enthusiastic during training. Marcus's heart sank. So there were at least 2 traitors. Reeves and Thomas spoke in low voices, their heads close together. Marcus could not hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. This was a conspiracy, not a lone actor. Marcus photographed the meeting from his hiding spot, then watched as Reeves handed Thomas a folded piece of paper. Thomas tucked it into his uniform and walked away quickly. Reeves sat on the bench for another minute, then returned to the palace through a different entrance. Marcus waited 10 minutes before moving, making sure neither of them could spot him returning. That night's report to Lord Ashford was grim. They now knew of 2 traitors, but there could be more. The advisor decided it was time to bring in the palace's intelligence service. Professional agents would take over the surveillance while Marcus continued his role as instructor to maintain the appearance of normalcy. Marcus felt both relieved and disappointed. He had found the traitors, but he would not be the one to bring them to justice. The intelligence agents moved with impressive efficiency. Within 3 days, they had intercepted communications between Reeves, Thomas, and the extremist group. The plot was worse than anyone had imagined. The extremists were planning to attack during the upcoming Spring Festival, when the royal family would be making a public appearance. Reeves and Thomas were going to disable security systems and leave specific doors unlocked, creating a path for the attackers to reach the royal family. Lord Ashford ordered the arrests to happen immediately. Marcus was present when security agents moved in during the early morning hours. Captain Reeves was taken from her quarters without incident, her face showing shock and then resignation. Thomas tried to run but was tackled by 3 agents before he reached the courtyard. Both were placed in custody and the palace went into lockdown. The other guards were devastated. They had worked alongside Reeves and Thomas, trusted them, considered them family. The betrayal cut deep. Some guards blamed themselves for not noticing the signs. Others became paranoid, wondering if there were more traitors they had missed. The unity and trust that made the Royal Guard effective was shattered. Marcus felt responsible, even though Lord Ashford assured him he had done excellent work. If Marcus had not noticed Reeves's suspicious behavior, if he had not followed her, if he had not found the notebook, the attack might have succeeded. The royal family could have been killed, but Marcus could not shake the feeling that his presence had somehow caused all of this. He was an outsider who had exposed the rot within the Guard, and now everyone was suffering for it. The Spring Festival was postponed indefinitely. The royal family remained in secure areas of the palace while intelligence agents continued their investigation. Marcus returned to training the guards, but the sessions were somber and tense. No one joked anymore. No one seemed comfortable. The dojo where Marcus had spent years teaching had been a place of growth and positive energy. The palace training grounds felt like a prison. Edmund found Marcus sitting alone in his office one evening. Without saying anything, Edmund pulled up a chair and sat down beside him. They sat in silence for several minutes before Edmund finally spoke. He thanked Marcus for uncovering the plot and told him that he had saved lives, including Edmund's own. The attack plan had called for killing several guards who would have been obstacles, and Edmund was on that list. Marcus appreciated Edmund's words, but they did not ease the weight on his chest. He had come to the palace by accident, kicked a royal guard to prevent a collision, and somehow ended up uncovering a conspiracy. His martial arts training had prepared him for combat, but not for this. Not for the moral complexity, the emotional strain, and the burden of knowing that his actions had consequences far beyond himself. As Edmund left the office, Marcus looked at the black belt he kept hanging on a hook by the door. It represented years of discipline, honor, and training, but it had not prepared him for the reality that sometimes doing the right thing meant betraying trust, living with suspicion, and carrying secrets that changed everything. His journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead would require more than just physical skill. The Palace Intelligence Service continued interrogating Captain Reeves and Thomas for 2 weeks. Both eventually provided detailed information about the extremist network they had been working with. The group was larger and more organized than anyone had realized. They had members in several countries, funding from unknown sources, and sophisticated plans for multiple attacks against royal families across Europe. Marcus was called into a secure briefing room where Lord Ashford and several intelligence officials presented their findings. The room had no windows, thick walls, and electronic countermeasures to prevent eavesdropping. Everyone present had top-level security clearance except Marcus, who was granted temporary access because of his crucial role in uncovering the plot. The lead intelligence officer, a stern woman named Director Hayes, explained that while the immediate threat had been neutralized, the larger network remained active. Other cells were still operating, and they would learn about the arrests soon if they had not already. The extremists would either abandon their plans or accelerate them, and either option presented problems for royal security across the continent. Marcus listened with growing horror as Director Hayes outlined the scope of the conspiracy. The Spring Festival attack was supposed to be coordinated with similar attacks in 3 other countries. The goal was to create chaos, undermine confidence in royal institutions, and promote the extremists' radical political agenda. Thanks to Marcus's investigation, authorities now had time to warn other governments and strengthen security everywhere. Lord Ashford then dropped an unexpected announcement. The intelligence services needed help coordinating security improvements across multiple royal households. They needed someone who understood palace security, who had earned the trust of the guards, and who could teach effective defensive techniques to protection details in different countries. They needed Marcus to become an international security consultant. Marcus was stunned. He had spent his entire adult life in one city, teaching at one dojo, following a simple routine. Now he was being asked to travel across Europe, work with foreign governments, and train elite security forces. It was so far beyond his original life that it felt like discussing someone else's future. But as Lord Ashford spoke about the importance of the work and the lives that could be saved, Marcus felt the familiar pull of duty. He accepted the position, though every instinct told him to run back to his comfortable dojo and his predictable students. Within a week, Marcus was on a plane to Stockholm, where the Swedish royal family needed assistance reviewing their security protocols. The flight was Marcus's first time traveling internationally, and he spent the entire journey feeling like an imposter. What did he really know about protecting royalty? He was just a martial arts instructor who had gotten lucky. Stockholm surprised him. The Swedish security team was professional, welcoming, and genuinely interested in learning from Marcus's experience. They had already been warned by international intelligence services about the extremist network, and they took the threat seriously. Marcus spent 2 weeks working with their royal guard, teaching the same techniques he had developed at his home palace, and learning from their unique approaches to protection. The Swedish guards operated differently than Marcus was used to. They emphasized teamwork and communication over individual combat skill. They practiced scenarios constantly, always looking for weaknesses in their plans. Marcus found their methods impressive and began incorporating their ideas into his own teaching. He was learning as much as he was teaching, growing beyond the limitations of his original training. From Stockholm, Marcus traveled to Brussels, then to Madrid, then to Copenhagen. Each royal household had different needs, different vulnerabilities, and different cultures among their security teams. Marcus adapted his teaching to fit each environment, becoming more flexible and creative with his methods. The shy dojo instructor who had never left his hometown was slowly transforming into a confident international consultant. But the travel was exhausting, and the pressure was constant. Marcus lived out of hotels and briefing rooms, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. He missed his students, his dojo, and the simple satisfaction of teaching a child how to properly execute a basic kick. This new life was important work, but it was also isolating and overwhelming. He called Edmund regularly, finding comfort in his friend's steady voice and dry humor. 4 months into his international assignment, Marcus was in Vienna when Director Hayes contacted him with urgent news. Intelligence agencies had intercepted communications suggesting the extremist network was planning a new attack. The target was unclear, but the timeline was short. Within 2 weeks, something would happen. All royal families were put on high alert, and security forces across Europe mobilized. Marcus was ordered to return to his home palace immediately. The king and queen needed the absolute best protection, and Lord Ashford wanted Marcus back where he could directly oversee guard training and readiness. Marcus caught the next flight, his mind racing through everything he had learned during his travels. If an attack was coming, he wanted to make sure the guards were as prepared as possible. When he arrived at the palace, the atmosphere was tense. Guards were working double shifts, security checkpoints had been reinforced, and the royal family had reduced their public appearances to near zero. Edmund looked exhausted but determined. He briefed Marcus on the new security measures that had been implemented and the concerns that kept everyone awake at night. Marcus immediately organized intensive training sessions. He pushed the guards harder than ever, running them through scenario after scenario. Hostage situations, vehicle attacks, coordinated assaults, everything he could imagine. The guards responded with fierce dedication, understanding that their training might soon be tested for real. The betrayal by Reeves and Thomas had made everyone more committed, more vigilant, and more determined to prove their loyalty. During the second week of heightened alert, Marcus received a message on his secured device. Director Hayes had new intelligence. The attack was definitely coming to his palace. An informant within the extremist network had provided specific details. 20 operatives were planning to strike during a minor ceremony that the royal family could not cancel without causing significant diplomatic problems. The ceremony would honor a visiting dignitary, and canceling would be seen as an international insult. Lord Ashford and Director Hayes met with Marcus to discuss options. They could not cancel the ceremony, but they could not let the attack succeed either. The plan was to let the extremists believe their operation was proceeding normally, while actually preparing a trap. Every guard would be ready. Undercover agents would be positioned throughout the palace. The moment the extremists made their move, they would be surrounded and captured. Marcus's role was crucial. He needed to position the guards in ways that looked normal but provided maximum defensive coverage. He needed to identify the best response patterns for different attack vectors, and he needed to be ready to fight alongside the guards if combat became necessary. His martial arts skills, which had brought him to the palace in the first place, might finally be needed for their original purpose. The 3 days leading up to the ceremony were the longest of Marcus's life. He triple-checked every security measure, ran through every contingency plan, and barely slept. Edmund stayed close, providing support and keeping Marcus grounded when the anxiety threatened to overwhelm him. They both knew that lives depended on getting everything right. There was no room for error. The night before the ceremony, Marcus returned to the courtyard where his journey had begun. He stood on the spot where he had kicked Edmund, trying to remember the person he had been that day. A simple instructor worried about honoring his master and his school. That person seemed so distant now, so innocent. The man Marcus had become carried heavy responsibilities and difficult knowledge. He understood danger in ways he never had before. Marcus performed his martial arts forms in the courtyard, moving through the familiar patterns that had shaped his life. Each kick, each punch, each block was a meditation and a prayer. He asked for the strength to protect the innocent, the wisdom to make good decisions, and the courage to face whatever came next. The physical movement centered his mind and calmed his fears. By the time he finished, Marcus felt ready. Tomorrow would bring the ceremony, and with it, almost certainly, an attack. Marcus had been trained in martial arts, thrust into palace intrigue, turned into an investigator, and transformed into an international security consultant. His entire journey had been unexpected and overwhelming. But as he walked back to his quarters, Marcus realized something important. Every experience, every challenge, every moment of doubt and fear had been preparing him for tomorrow. His black belt had taught him discipline and skill. His investigation had taught him awareness and patience. His international work had taught him adaptability and humility. Edmund's friendship had taught him trust and loyalty. Lord Ashford's guidance had taught him responsibility and purpose. Everything had been building toward this moment. Marcus did not know if he was truly ready, but he knew he would give everything he had to protect the royal family and the guards who had become his brothers and sisters in arms. The test was coming, and Marcus Chen would face it with everything his training, both martial and otherwise, had given him. The morning of the ceremony arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Marcus woke at dawn and went through his routine with mechanical precision. Shower, meditation, light breakfast, uniform inspection. Every action was deliberate, pushing away the anxiety that threatened to cloud his judgment. Today required absolute clarity. There was no room for mistakes or hesitation. The palace was already buzzing with activity when Marcus reached the security command center. Guards were checking equipment, reviewing positions, and confirming communication protocols. Director Hayes was coordinating with undercover agents positioned throughout the palace and surrounding areas. Lord Ashford was managing the diplomatic aspects, ensuring the visiting dignitaries remained unaware of the security concerns. Everyone had a role to play in the elaborate trap being set. Marcus met with Edmund and the other senior guards for a final briefing. He reviewed the security positions, emphasized the importance of staying alert, and reminded everyone to watch for anything unusual. The guards listened with intense focus. They all understood what was at stake. This was not a drill or a training exercise. Real extremists with real weapons were coming, and people could die if anything went wrong. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 2 p.m. in the Grand Hall. The visiting dignitary, an ambassador from a neighboring country, would be honored for his contributions to international relations. The royal family would attend, speeches would be made, and a formal dinner would follow. It was exactly the kind of public event the extremists wanted to disrupt. High visibility, diplomatic significance, and symbolic power. Intelligence suggested the attack would come during the ceremony itself, when the royal family would be most exposed. The extremists had inside information from Reeves and Thomas about security procedures, though they did not know those two had been arrested. They believed they were walking into a palace with compromised security. Instead, they would be walking into a fortress. As noon approached, Marcus did a final walkthrough of the Grand Hall. The room was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers, marble columns, and tapestries depicting centuries of royal history. Marcus looked past the beauty to see the tactical reality: entrances, exits, sightlines, cover positions, all the elements that would matter if violence erupted. He adjusted 2 guard positions slightly, improving their defensive angles. Edmund joined him for the walkthrough, and they moved through the space in comfortable silence. Their friendship had been forged through crisis and tested by stress. Marcus trusted Edmund completely, and that trust was returned without question. As they finished the inspection, Edmund placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and said simply, "We're ready." Marcus nodded, hoping his friend was right. The guests began arriving at 1 o'clock. Diplomats, nobles, palace officials, and other dignitaries filled the Grand Hall with polite conversation and formal greetings. Marcus watched from his position near the east entrance, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Every face was memorized, every movement analyzed. The undercover agents mixed seamlessly with the guests, invisible to everyone except Marcus and the command team. The royal family made their entrance at precisely 2 o'clock. The king and queen walked with dignified grace, their daughter between them. They took their positions on the ceremonial platform, and the ambassador was escorted to join them. The hall fell silent as the king began his speech. Marcus's heart rate increased. If the intelligence was correct, the attack would begin within the next 30 minutes. Director Hayes' voice came through Marcus's earpiece. Movement detected at the north perimeter. A vehicle had stopped near the service entrance, and 4 individuals were approaching the gate. Palace security was monitoring but not interfering yet. They wanted to catch the entire group, not just the first wave. Marcus signaled to the guards in the Grand Hall to increase alertness. The operation was beginning. 5 minutes later, another update. The 4 individuals had been joined by 6 more. They were dressed as catering staff, complete with uniforms and delivery boxes. The disguise was good but not perfect. Real catering deliveries had already been completed hours ago, and these individuals were not on any approved list. Security let them proceed, tracking their movement toward the service corridors that led to the Grand Hall. Marcus left his position and moved quickly through the palace, taking a route that would intercept the extremists before they reached the ceremony. 2 guards joined him, weapons ready. They reached a junction in the service corridor and waited in concealment. Marcus could hear footsteps approaching, multiple people moving quickly but trying to stay quiet. They were close now. The extremists rounded the corner, still believing their plan was proceeding perfectly. Marcus stepped into view, blocking their path. For a moment, everyone froze. The extremists stared at Marcus in his Royal Guard uniform, clearly confused about whether he was part of their operation or a real guard. Marcus used that moment of hesitation to assess the threat. 10 people, several with visible weapons, all looking increasingly nervous. The lead extremist, a tall man with cold eyes, reached for his weapon. Marcus moved faster. Years of martial arts training translated into instant action. He closed the distance in 2 steps and delivered a precise strike to the man's wrist, forcing him to drop the gun. The 2 guards with Marcus moved simultaneously, securing 2 more extremists before they could react. Chaos erupted in the corridor. Marcus engaged 3 extremists at once, his movements fluid and efficient. A kick to one man's knee dropped him immediately. An elbow to another's solar plexus left him gasping for air. A throw sent the 3rd crashing into the wall. But there were too many of them, and some were armed. Marcus heard gunshots deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. One of the guards beside him cried out and fell. Marcus felt a hot burning sensation across his left arm. He had been grazed by a bullet. More guards arrived, responding to the sounds of combat. The corridor became a battleground. Some extremists tried to fight their way through to the Grand Hall. Others attempted to flee back the way they had come. All exits were blocked by security forces. Director Hayes had planned the trap perfectly. The extremists were surrounded with nowhere to go. Marcus fought through the pain in his arm and the chaos around him. He disarmed one extremist and used the man's own momentum to pin him against the floor. Another rushed at Marcus with a knife. Marcus sidestepped, redirected the attacker's energy, and delivered a controlled strike that left the man unconscious but alive. Despite the violence, Marcus still followed his training. Disable, do not kill. Control, do not destroy. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes, though it felt like hours. When the last extremist was subdued and secured, Marcus leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His left arm was bleeding steadily, and his uniform was torn and dirty. The guard who had been shot was being treated by medical personnel who had rushed to the scene. The wound looked serious but not fatal. They had been incredibly lucky. Back in the Grand Hall, the ceremony had been quietly suspended. The royal family had been moved to a secure location the moment the attack began. The guests were told there had been a security concern and were being safely escorted out. The diplomatic incident Lord Ashford had worried about was being carefully managed. Most guests would never know how close they had been to danger. Marcus was taken to the Palace Medical Center where his arm was cleaned, stitched, and bandaged. The wound was painful but minor. The bullet had barely grazed him, taking more skin than anything else. He had been extraordinarily fortunate. A few inches to the right and the injury would have been much worse. As the doctor worked, Edmund arrived, his face showing relief and concern in equal measure. Edmund reported that all 10 extremists in the corridor had been captured. Another 8 had been arrested at the perimeter, trying to escape when they realized the operation had failed. 2 more were apprehended at a safe house where they had been monitoring police communications. The entire cell had been rolled up. Intelligence teams were already interrogating the captured operatives, learning about the network's structure and other planned operations. Director Hayes came to the medical center to personally thank Marcus. She acknowledged that his quick response in the corridor had been crucial. By engaging the extremists immediately and preventing them from reaching the Grand Hall, Marcus had protected dozens of innocent lives. The director also informed him that the injured guard would recover fully. His vest had absorbed most of the bullet's impact, and the injury was superficial. That evening, after everything had been secured and documented, Marcus was summoned to a private audience with the royal family. He was nervous as he entered the chamber, still wearing his damaged uniform and bandaged arm. The king, queen, and their daughter were waiting. They thanked him formally for his service and bravery. Then the king did something unexpected. He asked Marcus to kneel, and he used a ceremonial sword to knight him. Marcus Chen was now Sir Marcus, a knight of the realm. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the honor. He had started as a dojo instructor who accidentally kicked a guard. Now he was a knight, recognized by the crown for protecting the realm. It seemed impossible, like something from a story rather than real life. But the sword touching his shoulders had been real. The pride in the king's eyes had been real. The respect from the queen had been real. After the ceremony, Marcus returned to his quarters and sat in silence for a long time. His arm throbbed with pain and exhaustion was pulling at him. But more than that, he felt changed by everything that had happened. He had been tested in ways he never imagined. Combat, investigation, international coordination, and finally real violence in defense of others. His martial arts training had been the foundation, but the journey had required so much more. Marcus thought about his master back at the dojo. The old man had taught him that true strength was choosing not to fight. But today, Marcus had fought. He had hurt people, sent them to prison, and helped dismantle an entire extremist network. Had he betrayed his training? Or had he fulfilled it in a way his master never anticipated? The questions were complex, and Marcus did not have simple answers. What he did know was that the path forward was unclear. He could return to his simple life teaching at the dojo. He could continue working for the palace as a security consultant. Or he could do something entirely different with the knowledge and experience he had gained. For the first time since kicking Edmund in that courtyard, Marcus had choices. Real choices about who he wanted to be and how he wanted to serve. Recovery took longer than Marcus expected. His arm healed within a few weeks, but the emotional aftermath of the confrontation lingered. He dreamed about the fight in the corridor, replaying every moment with disturbing clarity. The faces of the extremists he had hurt haunted him. Even though he knew his actions had been necessary, the violence still troubled him deeply. His master had always taught that hurting others should never come easily, and Marcus found comfort in the fact that it did not. During his recovery, Marcus received dozens of letters and messages. Some came from other royal households across Europe, thanking him for his work and offering positions. Others came from private security companies wanting to hire him at impressive salaries. A few came from martial arts organizations wanting him to teach seminars or lead training programs. His reputation had spread far beyond the palace walls. One letter stood out from all the others. It was from his master at the dojo back home. The old man had heard about Marcus's actions through news reports and mutual connections. He wrote that he was proud of Marcus for staying true to the core principles of martial arts even in impossible situations. Control, discipline, protection of the innocent, these values had guided Marcus throughout his journey. The master's approval meant more to Marcus than the knighthood or any job offer. Edmund visited Marcus daily during his recovery, bringing food, conversation, and welcome distraction. One afternoon, Edmund revealed something he had been holding back. During the interrogations of the captured extremists, investigators had learned that Reeves and Thomas were not the only palace insiders involved. There had been a third conspirator, someone who had helped plan the entire operation from within. That person remained unidentified and presumably still free. The revelation shook Marcus. He had thought the threat was over, the conspiracy dismantled. Learning that another traitor was still hidden among the palace staff or guards brought back all the paranoia and suspicion he had fought to overcome. Edmund assured him that Director Hayes and her team were actively investigating, but so far they had found no leads. The third conspirator had covered their tracks perfectly. Lord Ashford came to see Marcus as he neared full recovery. The advisor looked older and more tired than Marcus remembered. The attack had taken its toll on everyone responsible for palace security. Ashford explained that the king wanted Marcus to take on a new role, not as a combat instructor or security consultant, but as the director of Royal Guard Training and Development. It would be a permanent position with significant authority and responsibility. Marcus asked for time to consider the offer. Part of him was honored and excited by the opportunity. He had grown to care deeply about the guards and the royal family. The work was meaningful and important, but another part of him longed for the simplicity he had lost. The dojo, his students, the peaceful routine of teaching basic techniques to people who would never face real danger. That life seemed impossibly distant but still deeply appealing. He decided to visit his old dojo before making any decisions. Marcus requested a week of leave and traveled back to his hometown for the first time in nearly a year. The city looked exactly the same, yet somehow different through his changed perspective. The streets seemed smaller, the buildings less impressive. He had seen palace grandeur, European capitals, and the inner workings of international security. His hometown felt like a place from his past rather than his present. The dojo was in its usual state of organized chaos. Students of all ages were practicing forms, sparring carefully and listening to instructors. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched, feeling a complex mix of nostalgia and disconnection. This had been his entire world once. Now it felt like watching a play he had starred in long ago. The role no longer fit quite right. His master greeted him with a warm embrace and knowing eyes. They sat together in the small office where Marcus had once filled out paperwork and scheduled classes. The old man asked him to tell the whole story, not the public version, but the real one. So Marcus talked for 2 hours, sharing everything: the accidental kick, the conspiracy, the investigation, the international work, the attack, and finally the choices he now faced. When Marcus finished, his master sat in silence for several minutes. Then he asked a simple question. Where did Marcus feel he could do the most good? Not where would he be most comfortable or most honored, but where could his skills, knowledge, and experience make the biggest difference? It was the kind of question that cut through confusion and revealed what really mattered. Marcus realized the answer immediately. He could do the most good at the palace. The dojo had other instructors who could teach the students. But the royal family needed someone who understood both martial arts and the complex world of palace security. The guards needed someone who could continue developing them into an elite protective force. And most importantly, there was still a traitor to find, unfinished business that Marcus could not walk away from. He returned to the palace and accepted Lord Ashford's offer. As director of Royal Guard Training and Development, Marcus had authority over all combat instruction, fitness programs, and tactical education for the guards. He also had unofficial permission to continue investigating the third conspirator. Director Hayes would provide intelligence support, but Marcus's unique position within the Guard gave him access and perspective the intelligence service lacked. Marcus threw himself into both roles with renewed purpose. He restructured the training programs, incorporating everything he had learned during his international work. He brought in guest instructors from different countries and different martial arts disciplines. He created exchange programs where guards could train with security forces from allied nations. The Royal Guard became one of the most advanced protective units in Europe. Simultaneously, Marcus continued his quiet investigation. He reviewed personnel files, studied duty rosters, and watched for any unusual patterns. The third conspirator was careful, leaving no obvious traces. But Marcus was patient. His master had taught him that martial arts was about timing and awareness. The same principles applied to investigation. Watch, wait, and act when the moment was right. Months passed without a breakthrough. Marcus began to wonder if the conspirator had fled or gone dormant, too scared to act after seeing what happened to Reeves, Thomas, and the captured extremists. But then Edmund brought him an interesting observation. One of the administrative staff, a woman named Sarah who managed guard schedules and palace logistics, had been asking unusual questions about security protocols. Nothing obviously suspicious, but enough to catch Edmund's attention. Marcus began paying closer attention to Sarah. She had worked at the palace for 5 years with an excellent record. She was efficient, friendly, and well-liked by everyone. On the surface, she was exactly what she appeared to be. But Marcus had learned that surfaces could be deceiving. He started tracking her movements, her communications, and her access to sensitive information. 3 weeks into his surveillance, Marcus noticed something odd. Sarah had been accessing personnel files for guards who had been dismissed or retired over the past 2 years. The access was legitimate based on her role, but the pattern was strange. Why would she need information about guards who no longer worked at the palace? Marcus reported this to Director Hayes, who authorized more intensive monitoring. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the captured extremists from the corridor attack agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. He confirmed that the network had a contact in palace administration, someone who provided information about guard assignments and security schedules. The description he gave matched Sarah almost perfectly. It was not definitive proof, but it was enough for Director Hayes to move forward. Sarah was brought in for questioning under the pretense of a routine security review. At first, she maintained her innocence convincingly, but when confronted with specific details from the extremist's testimony, her composure cracked. She admitted to providing information to the network, though she claimed she thought she was helping a legitimate political organization, not violent extremists. She had been manipulated and used, or so she said. The interrogation revealed that Sarah had been recruited years earlier, long before Reeves or Thomas. She had been the original source of intelligence about palace operations. When the extremists needed people closer to the royal family, Sarah had identified Reeves and Thomas as potential recruits. She had been the spider at the center of the web, hidden in plain sight because no one suspected an administrative worker. Her arrest completed the dismantling of the conspiracy within the palace. Director Hayes confirmed that no other insiders had been involved. The threat that had dominated Marcus's life for the past year was finally, truly over. The relief was overwhelming. Marcus had carried the weight of responsibility, suspicion, and danger for so long that their absence felt strange, almost uncomfortable. The king held a private ceremony to honor Marcus and Edmund for their work in protecting the realm. Both were given medals and formal recognition, but more meaningful to Marcus was the trust and respect he saw in the eyes of the guards he trained. They had been through crisis together, survived betrayal together, and emerged stronger together. Marcus had become more than their instructor. He had become their leader and their friend. As Marcus stood in the courtyard that evening, the place where his journey had begun with an accidental kick, he reflected on how far he had come. From a simple dojo instructor to a knight of the realm. From a man who avoided conflict to someone who had faced down armed extremists. The transformation had been painful, unexpected, and profound. His black belt had brought him here, but everything else had come from within himself, from qualities he had not known he possessed. 2 years had passed since Marcus kicked Edmund in the courtyard. In that time, the palace had been transformed. Security protocols were stronger, the royal guard was more skilled, and the sense of vulnerability that followed the conspiracy had been replaced with confidence. Marcus had played a central role in that transformation, but he knew he could not take all the credit. It had been a collective effort by everyone who served the royal family. Marcus's role had evolved beyond training. He now advised on international security matters, represented the palace at diplomatic functions, and mentored the next generation of royal guards. His reputation extended across Europe, and he frequently received requests to consult on security matters for other governments and organizations. But he remained based at the palace, committed to the people who had become his family. Edmund had been promoted to captain, taking over the position left vacant by Reeves's betrayal. He and Marcus worked closely together, combining Edmund's operational expertise with Marcus's strategic vision. Their friendship had deepened through shared experience and mutual respect. They could communicate with a glance, anticipate each other's thoughts, and trust each other completely. In many ways, Edmund had become the brother Marcus never had. The royal family's trust in Marcus was absolute. He dined with them occasionally, advised the king on security policy, and taught the young princess basic self-defense techniques. The princess was a bright, curious child who asked endless questions and approached martial arts with surprising dedication. Marcus saw something of himself in her earnest desire to learn and improve. Teaching her became one of his favorite responsibilities. But despite all the success and recognition, Marcus sometimes felt a lingering sense of disconnection. He had gained so much, but he had also lost something important. The simplicity and purity of his original calling. The joy of teaching a beginner their first proper kick. The satisfaction of watching a student overcome fear and discover their own strength. The palace was magnificent and the work was crucial, but it lacked something essential that Marcus missed deeply. One evening, Marcus received a letter from his old master. The dojo was struggling financially and enrollment had been declining. The master was getting older and finding it difficult to manage everything alone. He was not asking for help directly, but the subtext was clear. The place where Marcus had learned everything, where his journey had truly begun, was in danger of closing. The thought disturbed Marcus more than he expected. He discussed the situation with Lord Ashford. The advisor listened carefully and then made a surprising suggestion. What if Marcus created a program that connected the palace with the community? Young people from disadvantaged backgrounds could receive free martial arts training at the palace, taught by royal guards under Marcus's direction. It would serve multiple purposes: community outreach, guard development, and preservation of martial arts tradition. Marcus loved the idea immediately. He could honor his master's teachings, help young people who needed positive direction, and give the guards an opportunity to teach and mentor. It would bridge the gap between the palace and the outside world, making the royal family seem more accessible, while also identifying potential future guards from diverse backgrounds. Lord Ashford agreed to present the proposal to the king. The king approved the program enthusiastically. Within 3 months, the Royal Guard Youth Initiative was launched. 20 young people from across the city were selected for the first class. They came from various backgrounds, some privileged and some struggling, but all shared a desire to learn martial arts and serve their community. Marcus designed a curriculum that combined physical training with lessons about honor, duty, and service. The program exceeded everyone's expectations. The young students thrived under the structured training and positive attention. The guards discovered that teaching was rewarding in ways they had not anticipated. Parents and community leaders praised the palace for investing in youth development. Most importantly, Marcus found the sense of purpose he had been missing. He was teaching again, shaping young lives and passing on the wisdom his master had given him. Marcus invited his old master to visit the palace and observe one of the training sessions. The old man came reluctantly, uncomfortable with the grandeur and formality. But when he saw Marcus teaching, saw the dedication of the students and the excellence of the program, his eyes filled with tears. He told Marcus that he had exceeded every expectation, taken the simple teachings of the dojo and elevated them to serve an entire nation. That conversation helped Marcus understand something important. He had not abandoned his original calling. He had expanded it. The principles remained the same: discipline, respect, control, protection of others. But the application had grown from a small dojo to a royal palace, from teaching basic self-defense to coordinating international security. His master's teachings had been the seed, and everything that followed had been the growth of that seed into something larger. One afternoon, Marcus was conducting a training session when a young man in the program asked him about the story everyone had heard. Was it true that he had kicked a royal guard, and that is how he ended up working at the palace? Marcus smiled and told the truth. Yes, he had kicked Edmund, but that action had only opened a door. Everything that came after, the investigation, the attack, the conspiracy, the growth and change, that had all required much more than a single kick. Edmund was present for the conversation and added his own perspective. He told the students that getting kicked had been painful and embarrassing, but it had also introduced him to someone who became his closest friend and made him a better guard. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, if you approach them with the right attitude. The students listened intently, understanding that they were hearing something valuable. As the program continued to grow, Marcus began receiving requests from other countries to replicate the model. The Royal Guard Youth Initiative became internationally recognized as an innovative approach to community engagement and security force development. Marcus traveled occasionally to help other nations establish similar programs, but he always returned to the palace. This was his home now, his purpose, and his commitment. The anniversary of the corridor attack was marked with a private ceremony, honoring those who had been wounded and those who had fought to protect the palace. Marcus stood with Edmund and the other guards, remembering that chaotic and terrifying day. The injured guard who had been shot spoke about his recovery and his gratitude for the brothers and sisters who had rushed to his aid. The ceremony was emotional and healing, acknowledging pain while celebrating survival and unity. That evening, Marcus walked through the palace alone, visiting all the places that had become significant during his journey. The holding room where he had first been questioned. The storage room where he had found Reeves's notebook. The corridor where the attack had happened. Each location held memories, some difficult and some triumphant, but all part of the story of who he had become. He ended his walk in the courtyard, the place where everything had started. The marble floor looked the same as it had that Tuesday morning when he arrived for a simple demonstration. But everything else had changed. Marcus had changed. He was no longer the shy instructor who avoided conflict and followed routines. He was a leader, an investigator, a warrior, and a teacher who operated on an international stage. Yet at his core, Marcus was still guided by the same principles his master had taught him in that small dojo. True strength was not about fighting, but about protecting. True skill was not about hurting others, but about controlling oneself. True honor was not about recognition, but about doing what was right regardless of consequences. These truths had carried him through every challenge and would continue to guide him forward. Marcus thought about the young students in his program, about the guards he trained, about the royal family he protected, and about his master back at the struggling dojo. He thought about Edmund, Lord Ashford, Director Hayes, and all the people who had shaped his unexpected journey. He thought about Reeves, Thomas, and Sarah, whose betrayals had taught him about the complexity of human motivation and the importance of vigilance. Most of all, Marcus thought about the moment of that kick. 1 second of reaction that had changed absolutely everything. He had been trying to prevent an accident, acting on instinct and training without thinking about consequences. That single moment had led to a year of conspiracy and danger, international travel and recognition, personal growth and profound challenge. It had led him to exactly where he was supposed to be, even though he never could have predicted or planned it. A young guard approached Marcus in the courtyard, interrupting his reflection. There was a new student in the youth program who was struggling with a particular technique. Could Marcus come and provide some guidance? Marcus smiled and nodded, following the guard back toward the training grounds. This was his life now. Teaching, protecting, serving, and growing. The black belt around his waist was just cloth, but what it represented, the years of discipline, the commitment to improvement, the dedication to helping others, that was everything. As Marcus walked through the palace, he felt a deep sense of peace. His journey had been unexpected and often frightening. He had been tested in ways he never imagined and had discovered capabilities he did not know he possessed. But through it all, he had remained true to the core values that defined him. He had kicked a royal guard in the face and ended up becoming a knight, a director, a leader, and most importantly, a better version of himself. The training grounds came into view, filled with young students practicing their forms with varying degrees of success. Marcus entered the space with familiar comfort, ready to teach, correct, encourage, and inspire. His black belt training had brought him to the palace, but his character had allowed him to stay and thrive. The kick had opened the door, but Marcus had walked through it with courage, integrity, and commitment. And he would continue walking that path wherever it led next, because that was who Marcus Chen had become. A martial artist, a protector, a teacher, and a man who understood that true mastery was not about perfecting techniques, but about perfecting oneself. His story had begun with an accident, continued through crisis, and settled into purpose. The journey was far from over, but Marcus was finally, truly ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.